Okay. I'm gonna start with beef today. This is the next species that we're gonna be doing. So the main primals for this one are chuck, brisket, rib, short loin, loin. It'll be just loin, plate, flank, and round. This really isn't a good picture, but it was close I could find. So our first primal is gonna be brisket, and brisket's easy to remember. The cookery is easy to remember because it's all moist. It's a very The cut is very fatty and very tough, so it needs to be cooked for long times, usually smoked for a long period of time over in a crock pot. So the first one is corn brisket. This is easily identified by a packet of seasoning in the middle. You'll just see it on top. Sometimes you'll see the whole brisket like already seasoned. The packet won't be there, but you'll see the seasoning on top or around it, or it'll just be cured. So but usually it's just the packet of seasoning. This is beef brisket, corn brisket moist. The next one is flat half. So this one's, as the name says, just the flat half of the whole brisket. Again, it's all moist. All brisket is moist. So it's beef, brisket, flat half, boneless, and moist. You don't really have to like memorize boneless because it's flat half is going to be the only choice for flat half. There isn't going to be a bone in or a bone. Okay, this is the whole brisket. You can see on the left side, um, that side is actually flatter than the right side. So we, that's why the first one is named flat half. A different color. But yes. So this side or this side right here, that's going to be a flat half um, because it's quite literally flat. The right side, it's where most of the fat is, and very you can see it's very different in size. Okay, so that's that. And again, all of brisket is moist, so it's gonna be beef, brisket, whole brisket, moist. Okay, the next one, rib. Rib is all dry. It was dry in lamb, it's dry here. Excuse me. Um, so yeah, some things that we need to you can remember from lamb are that the bone, it's curvy. It's not T-shaped. It's more like a C or J. I don't know how you might want to think about it, but it's very curved. Again, that is to serve the purpose of protecting the um it serves as a rib cage, protecting the lungs. So that's why it's so curved. And you can remember that. The other thing that is you're gonna need to know is this right here. This muscle group right there, that's called the ribeye. You're gonna continue to see this throughout the contest, especially if you guys pass prelims. But very easy way to remember that it's the rib. It's because it has this ribeye right there. That's your ribeye. It also usually has this second muscle group right here. I have no idea what it's called, but there is that second muscle group there. Main thing though is that ribeye that will give it away, along with that bone right there. And this one is a very big cut. So you can see probably flip this over, there'll be about two, maybe three vertebrae. It'll probably be cut up into, if you were to cut it this roast up, into maybe two or three steaks. So this one, because it's so large, it's the beef rib roast. And I said the rib primal is dry again. So it is dry. Okay. This is your ribeye steak. This one has a bone. Again, we can see that ribeye right here. That second muscle group right there. And then that very curvy bone right there. So when I was first learning this, I only used these cards. So this PowerPoint is made from cards that I scanned in and I put them into here. But when I was starting out in ninth grade, 4 years ago, we only had these cards. That was our only resource, or at least the only resource that we knew of at the time. We didn't like with this photo, you cannot see the bone because it's covered by a layer of fat and muscle. Um, so just be aware of that. You might not be able to see the bone, but there is a bone there. And this cut is called beef ribeye steak lip on. That lip on refers to the bone. So when you look at this one, this is your ribeye steak boneless. It does not have that lip per se, like this one does. But that lip is just the bone. So you can think about this one as bone in, but when you answer the question, like when you put in your answer into the Scantron, to the scanning the sheet that you have to use for the contest, it'll appear as ribeye steak lip on. So make sure you know that this with the bone is the lip. Okay, this is the other steak. Again, ribeye there, that second muscle group there, but this one does not have a bone at all. So this one is boneless. And you can see that it has very little structure because they take off the bone. Muscles attached to the bones, so they can have some type of structure. So this one's beef, ribeye steak, boneless. Another good way to remember rib is that there is this layer of fat, well, usually in between the two muscle groups, which can help you identify that in the muscle primal. In the rib primal, sorry. Okay. Next one is uh sort of like this one, but it does not have that bone. So you can see ribeye right there, second muscle group, and then that layer of fat that's in between the ribeye and that second layer. Again, you can see that it's a big cut. If you were to look at this from a different angle, you can see that you can get 4 or 5 steaks, especially since it doesn't have that vertebrae, so you don't have to cut in between the vertebrae. Does not have any sort of bone, so it is boneless. Very easy to remember. So beef, ribeye, roast, boneless, and is dry. All of rib is dry. Okay, next one is flank. This is a easy one. Flank only has one cut, and it looks like this. So, when we're looking at this one, and we're gonna look at a different cut that looks similar, but it's not the same. Flank, the muscle fibers, you can actually look at them, you can see them right here. They're big enough to be looked at. They run lengthwise along the muscle, along the cut. So they run like that. So it's an easy way to remember that it's flank, a flank steak. Obviously this cut will be very flat. It'll be, you can cook it on a pan as you would a steak. However, this muscle is what connects the leg muscle to like the abdomen, or if the hind leg, the abdomen, or the foreleg to the chest, to where like the breast is. So that muscle is used a lot when the cow walks, obviously. So it's a little tougher than most. So instead of just being like a regular steak that's cooked dry, it has to be cooked dry moist because of how tough it is. So again, lengthwise muscle fibers help you remember that it's from the flank. So beef, flank steak, dry moist. Next one, it's plate. This one's kind of easy. So this one, plate is when we look at the animal, rib is here, and then plate is right underneath it. So when you think about rib cage extends from the spine all the way down to the breast. So you'll see rib bones in the rib, obviously, and then all the way at the bottom where the plate is, there will also be rib bones. So because of that, we see rib bones here, and that is, it gives it name. It's called short ribs. So this cut, some of you might have seen it in the kitchen, parents cooking. It's these ribs, they can't be eaten like steak, like our um ribeye steak, because it's really tough. It's literally mostly bone. There is some uh meat on it. However, it's really tough. So you have to cook it for long times in a stew, again, a crock pot, however you like, but it needs to be cooked for a long time. So this is beef, plate, short ribs, moist. Other thing is that this cut will always be like either rectangular or squared, because they will get that rest of the rib bone and they will chop it up into little bits like this, into little cubes. The other cut in this primal is the skirt steak. Um, this one is it looks kind of like the flank steak, but don't get it confused, because this one, the fibers run widthwise. So instead of it going like the flank lengthwise like this, it goes widthwise. So it'll go this way. It's actually a pretty big cut. So sometimes you'll see it folded in on each other because of how big the cut is. But this one, similarly to the flank steak, is dry moist, because that those ribs were tough, right? So this one's also a little bit tough. So it needs to be cooked. You can cook it on the pan, but you would have to put a top on it, or a lid on it, so you can make sure to cook it with the moisture that it has. So beef, plate, skirt steak, boneless, and dry moist. Okay, so the next one is chuck. This is chuck is that shoulder. We just call it chuck here. The same shoulder you would see in pork or lamb. So this one is 7 bone. You can see when you look at it here, 7, upside down 7. Or when you just look at this one, a 7. That's why we call it a 7 bone. You also think of it as a T, a weird T, but we just call it 7 bone. So that one is that. It will have cartilage right here. It will have vertebrae, sometimes a bone there, but main thing to look at is this scapular bone. Scapular bone is your shoulder blade. This bone right here is that shoulder blade just cut. It's just cut into slices. So yeah, the main thing when you're looking at this one is just to look at that bone and it will tell you what it is. So this is chuck. This is the chuck primal. We remember from lamb that the shoulder was pretty tough, so that's why it needed to be cooked dry moist. This is a bigger cut than the lamb, bigger animal, obviously, way bigger. So instead of that shoulder being just dry moist, it's mainly comprised of moist cuts. So this one is a 7-bone pot roast, beef chuck 7-bone pot roast, and it's moist. So the main reason it is moist is because of this muscle right here. This muscle is the mock tender steak. Um, so when a cut is cut down from a primal, it looks at all the muscles groups. This one is dry moist. This one probably dry moist as well. But if there is one section in the cut that's moist, the whole thing has to be moist. We'll see that later on again. But this one, to like give you an idea of where some of the cuts are coming from, this one right here is going to be your mock tender steak. And then this one right here is going to be your top blade or your flat iron. It has that name is interchangeable. Yeah. Again, the main thing to look for in this cut is that bone, that 7 bone. Next one is arm pot roast, bone in. So we remember seeing a leg bone and arm chop in lamb. Similarly, there's this circular arm bone in the arm pot roast. So that's the main way to remember it. If there's a circular bone in it, it's from the arm. It's the arm pot roast. This one, this one is moist as well. It's a very big cut and it is very tough in certain areas. Some parts are a little bit easier to chew on, but most of it is pretty tough. Okay. This one is your arm pot roast boneless. So you can see here all these muscle groups, they wrap around that bone and they attach that bone. This one, you can tell that it's wrapping around something that isn't there, that there's something missing in that area. Here is where the bone is supposed to be. Right here also. That these muscles are trying to wrap around that bone. However, the bone was taken out. So it's boneless, obviously, because there's no bone. But you can remember that it's an arm pot roast because it wraps around something that you can tell it's trying to wrap around something that there's a bone missing right there. Here as well, there's a bone missing there. That this muscle right here clearly shows that it wraps around something. So you have to think about if there's something missing as well. If there's any bones missing, you have to look at the muscle groups, see their direction, their functionality, which way they're shaped towards. Sometimes it'll show you that there is a bone missing and that it will tell you that this cut is boneless. This is beef, chuck, arm pot roast, boneless, moist. So again, we've been seeing that chuck mostly moist. That's not always the case. But for now, these big cuts are going to be moist. Okay, this one is our blade roast. This one is easily shown right here. This muscle right there, this bone right there looks kind of like a knife. That's why we call it a blade. It's comes right next to the 7 bone because the scapular bone looks like this. It looks if I can get a better picture. Here. You can see that there is there is certain areas that are flat like this. Right here, there's flat, but there's also like this bone right there that's sticking out. So that shows, it gives you an idea how irregular the scapular bone is. You can see here, you can ask your teacher to give you a better image of it as well. But you can see that scapular bone is irregular in some areas. So it'll have a bone sticking out, a piece of it sticking out one way, and then some parts will just be flat. And that's why this one comes from the same bone. However, it's instead of having a 7-bone look, it's just looks like a straight blade. So easy way to remember. It also usually has a vertebrae and then a little bit of a rib. But main way is that blade. It'll also usually have this cartilage, which if you ever chewed on, is not easy to eat or pleasant to eat. And that's why if it has any cartilage like that or any big groups of fat, it'll be moist. So it has that cartilage. So it's beef chuck blade roast moist. Next one is our eye roast boneless. Easy way to remember this one is because it has many muscle groups like eyes. Let's see here, eyes. You can see it here as well. So this one comes from the chuck. And it is dry moist because it is from the chuck. It's leg muscle, the forelegs. So it is used a lot in walking, movement. So the muscle becomes tough because of all that use. So again, these eyes will show you. Usually it'll be wrapped up like this with some twine, but main thing to look at is those eyes. Next one is, okay, so yeah. Oh, I don't know why I put primal moist. It's chuck. Don't worry about that. That was an error. So it's beef, chuck, iris boneless, and dry moist. This is the cut that would come from this one, like the steak that would come from that. So this is the eye steak, and you can have a better picture of the eyes here. See all of these muscle groups, little muscle groups, little muscle groups. We call those eyes. You can see it here too. There you go. All those eyes, and that's why we call it an eye steak or an eye roast. And the other one, and this one, you can see that it's much bigger than just the steak. You can get like maybe 3 or 4 actually from this roast. You can get 3 or 4 of these steaks from that. So again, that is beef chuck eye steak boneless, and this one's big. That's why it was dry moist. However, this one was smaller, so you could just cook it in a pan, and it's like tender enough to be cooked simply dry. This is your mock tender roast. This is a very tough muscle. It looks similar to a tenderloin, which is dry and it's very tender, but it's not at all. This is a very tough muscle. So you can actually see how big like just from looking at this picture, you can see those muscle fibers. They're clearly visible. So if those muscle fibers are that big, it'll tell you that it's a tough muscle. See all those muscle fibers? yeah. It'll look like tenderloin, but it'll be narrow on one base and wide on the other base. So kind of like a cone in a way. So this is gonna be beef, chuck, mock tender roast, moist. This is the mock tender steak. Sometimes you might find an M on it. That's how I was taught, but it won't always look like that. Easy way to remember it is two muscles, kind of like the tenderloin. There's going to be one main muscle right here in the center, and then on the side, muscle attached. However, you can see those muscle fibers, they are huge, making it moist, and it comes from mock tender roast. So if it comes from a moist cut, it'll automatically be moist. Let's see. Okay, so beef, chuck, mock tender steak, moist. This is a petite tender. It is cooked dry. So this one, um, I've seen people get it wrong, mistaking it for flank, but excuse me, there will be this like film. You can kind of see it because you can't necessarily see the muscle fibers clearly. You will just see like this coating on the muscle. It honestly, I always remembered it as looking like a fish. Looks like a fish, honestly, if you really think about it. But yes, easy way to remember it, like I remember it, a fish, or you can look at it and you can't see the muscle fibers easily. You'll see this membrane or coat around that muscle. That's your petite tender. It's also very thin and tender. That's why it's called a petite tender. Um, so beef chuck petite tender dry. And this one up here was called a mock tender. And it's called, in the name, it implies it mock tender because it mocks a tender cut. So it's not tender at all. It's just being a copycat, but it's not actually. Next one is the shoulder pot roast. And this shoulder pot roast, I always confused it with arm pot roast. Um, excuse me. It was I was confused it with the arm pot roast because it's just a huge cut and it looks like a excuse me, arm pot roast boneless. However, if we really break it down, you can see this line of cartilage that goes right down the middle. It's not going to be there in the shoulder pot roast. I mean, in the arm pot roast. This one is the shoulder pot roast. It also has no muscles that look like they're wrapping around something. It's just, so when you look at this, you'll think of the arm pot roast, they wrap around. And then this one is just going to be attached to that arm pot roast. It'll help the other muscles move. That's why you can see it being a very tough muscle. But because it's not as active as the arm part roast, which is always attached to that bone, it's dry roast. So this is shoulder pot roast boneless. Um, there shouldn't be any bone in. I don't think so. You really don't have to memorize the boneless. It just doesn't have bone. Um, Again, beef chuck, shoulder pot, roast, boneless, and dry mice. Try to remember that if there is any muscles that look like they're wrapping around something, it'll be your arm part roast. But since this shoulder pot roast, it doesn't seem to wrap around the bone or anything at all. It just looks like it was just attached onto something, not necessarily wrapping around it. That's how you remember it's the shoulder. You can think of it like the arm is your arm, obviously, and then your shoulder just sits on top. And this one, like I mentioned earlier, this is your top blade steak or your flat iron. The names are interchangeable. This is one way it can look like. So this is the flat iron. Excuse me, this is the top blade view, I'm pretty sure. And then this other one that we looked at earlier, this is the top blade view, or the flat iron view. So this cut right here is the same cut we saw down there. It's the exact same cut. It's just that it can be sliced in half along that layer of fat. Sometimes it's sliced right there in half, and that's why it might look different, but it's this same cut. So if you see any of those two, that's the cut that you're looking at. So beef, chuck, top blade steak, or flat iron, and dry moist. It's used, the name is interchangeable. Okay. Next one is round. The round is the hump, the rump, the rump, the hind legs, however you wish to think about it. That's the round, sorry. Okay, this is tip steak. I think for this one, we should start with the roast. This is tip roast. Tip roast cap off. Um, Usually the cap refers to a muscle. I always thought it was the fat, but it's actually just the muscle that they don't talk. This is a big cut, and it has around three main muscle groups. So one, two, three. And that is the main thing about the tip roast. It'll be cut up into three sections. When you look at it from the side, it'll also be, you can clearly see three sections. So beef, round, tip roast cap off, and it's dry moist. This is from the top of the rump, so like where the back is, kind of like where that tail would be. That's where the section is. And it's tough, but it's not too bad. So it's dry moist. So we go on to the steak. We can see sections as well. You can see one, two, and three. So one, two, and three main sections. And that's how you know it's the tip from the tip steak, tip roast from the tip roast. Excuse me. This is the tip steak. We can see that because it's right there. That width is pretty small, so it's a steak. This is beef round tip steak cap off, and it'll be dry, and it is dry because it's a steak. Since the roast was dry moist because it was so big. Um, the roast is so big, so it needs to be dry moist. But the steak is smaller, so it could be cooked dry. Okay, so this one, I think for this part, we will start with round steak. This is our round steak. Round steak. Okay. First thing we see, a leg bone right there. We can see that. We can differentiate the round cuts from the chuck cuts because the rump and the shoulder, because the shoulder will always have um a lot of muscle groups. So we remember in the eye steak there were a lot of little muscle groups. So that's only seen in the chuck. Chuck will have a lot of different muscle groups. But in the round, since it's not as specialized per se, it's only used to move, there will be a few major muscle groups. So about 3 or 4. There's one here too. And that's it. There's not going to be any more. It'll just be a couple of muscle groups. So yes. So this is our round steak. It will have all of the muscle groups. This is like you can think of this cut as a center slice and lamb. Pretty much the same thing. It looks exactly the same actually. It's just bigger. This is bigger. Um, this one is moist because yeah, which one is moist? Because it has this cut in it. This is the bottom round steak. So right here. It's actually I made sure to do it in this angle. This is going to be your top because it's at the top, bottom, and then eye around. This is just the eye. This is the top, and this is the bottom. This bottom is moist, so the whole thing has to be moist. Okay, so move on to this one. Like I said earlier, this is the eye. This is gonna be the eye roast because you can see how long it is. It's just big. So you can see actually the muscle fibers. They're not too big, but they're pretty big. So you can see that it's a tough muscle. So that's gonna make this cut dry moist. So beef round, eye round roast, dry moist. So you remember the other one it was called round roast, eye roast as well. Make sure to remember that this one is eye round roast because it comes from the round. You can see muscle fibers also coming that way, but it's just the same muscle, these muscle fibers going through the whole steak, the whole cut, sorry. This one is our bottom round rump roast. This is your rump. This has like a little, just an extra muscle. That's your rump. This is the bottom round. And honestly, it just looks triangular. That's how I always remembered it. Very triangular cut, bottom round. Beef round, bottom round, rump roast, dry moist. This one's our bottom round steak. It's weird because this one comes from this one. This one's dry moist, but this one's moist for some reason. I'm pretty sure it's because of this muscle right here. This right there. That little piece wraps around the bone and has like tendons and cartilage, so it'll be tougher. So because one little itty bitty piece is moist, the whole thing has to be moist. So the roast, bottom round roast is dry moist, bottom round steak, moist. Y'all just need to practice it. You guys will get the hang of it. It takes time. Beef round, bottom round roast, round steak, excuse me, and moist. This is your top round. We saw earlier right here. It was like it took up over half of the steak because it wraps around the whole leg. Let's see, where did I put it? Right here. It wraps around the whole thing. Just remember the top one, top round steak, top round roast. Excuse me, this was a roast. Top round roast will be taking up most of the leg, and then the other two cuts are smaller. The eye looks simply like a circle, like a tube eye, and then the bottom round looks like a triangle. So beef round, top round roast, dry. Again, takes over half of the leg. This one's the round steak, except it doesn't have that arm or the leg bone right there where it's supposed to be. You can see it's just missing. That's the same one, it's just missing the bone. This one is our bottom round roast. It's the same as the rump roast, except it doesn't have that little muscle that was attached to it. We saw earlier a rump on this one. It had that little muscle. That's the rump. And then this one is just the bottom round roast instead of, it has no rump. Again, similar cuts, it's dry moist. So beef round, bottom round roast, dry moist. This one we saw earlier, it was the eye round steak, or eye round roast, but this one's just a steak because it's sliced up. We can see here, it's shorter, so it's a steak. That original group was dry moist, and it still is dry moist because those muscle fibers are pretty big still. So it needs to be cooked dry moist. So beef round, eye round steak, dry moist. We saw this one, that's your round steak. So beef round, round steak. This one, beef round. Excuse me, beef round, round steak boneless, and it's moist as well. So this one tip roast because 3 sections, dry moist. And this is your top round steak, and it's dry because you look at it, have big fibers, big fibers. However, they're pretty loose. You can see like big lines in between them. So it shows like looseness in the muscle fibers, so it's a little more tender. And you think of it just like the roast was dry moist, so the steak is dry. Not always true, but for this one it is. So beef round, top round steak, dry. Next one is loin. Okay, loin. I'm pretty sure it's all dry, except for one. Yeah, loin is all dry except for one cut, and we'll look at it. So when in doubt, loin is all dry. So this one's tri-tip roast. Easy way, it's a triangle. Here, even this one, it has that triangular shape, even though it's a little bit not too triangular, still has that triangular shape from the loin. Beef loin, tri-tip roast, dry. This one is our top sirloin steak. I think you guys remember when I was talking about the sirloin. Sirloin has its that section that where the loin, and it's the vertebrae, obviously the vertebrae where the loin comes to become the leg. So if you think about the spine, it goes from the head and then the spine and then to the leg, right? There's a section in between the loin muscles, the loin bones. Actually, it'll be better if I just show you. Here. Oh, you guys actually can't see that. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. I think you guys can see screen share. I did not realize you guys could not see that before. Okay. Oh, well, I had told you guys earlier about a scapular bone, and I guess you guys did not see it. Okay, scapular bone. This is the scapular bone. There's a bone sticking out, the rest of it is flat. Pretty easy. It's your shoulder blade. It's exactly the same. It's just longer in cattle and in animals in general. Okay, like I was saying, vertebrae goes from the head to the neck, and then the shoulder, and then this part, this section right there, That's the rib. And then this part right here, that's the loin. However, right here, this tiny section, right there, that's your sirloin. So it's where the loin, that vertebrae becomes more irregular and irregular until it turns into the leg bone, the hip bone, pelvis. How do I change the screen again? Maybe you're not seeing. If you are, I am not entirely clear. Sorry, I'm not good with Zoom. Okay, as I was saying, sirloin is where the loin becomes leg. So that space between that bone in between, that's your sirloin. So it still has meat on it, and it's coming from like similar to the loin. Okay, so we remember okay, our sirloin cuts do not have any bones, so it might be a little hard to teach it. Okay, so remember that sirloin bone was very irregular. It's supposed to go here. However, we can see a big muscle group there, kind of like our ribeye, you can think of it. And then this other group right here. So these two muscle groups show your tenderloin. This this big one actually has like three. And then it has this tender cut right there. When we look at T-bone, actually, let's go look at it right now so we can compare it for you guys. Okay. T-bone, T-bone, T-bone. You guys know this cut. Easy. We have our loin muscle right here, and then our tenderloin, this loin right here. Best cut in the animal, arguably. Some people think it's other parts, but for marketing purposes, it is the best cut. It is the most tender. So that's your filet mignon, your tenderloin, that right here. So this is the inside. This is the exterior of the animal, exterior, and this is the interior. So that's why this one, even though the muscle is being used, it's not as tough as the outside, even though that one is still pretty good. So we can see that there is a tenderloin, there is an inside muscle group and an outside muscle group. Similarly, in sirloin, we have an outside group, which will be these two, and then our tender inside group. There's no bone, so you can't really see the distinction and um, the divide, the apparent divide like the bone has, but you can see that this part right here, it's darker. So usually those darker cuts are more tender when it's fresh. You have to think about it when it's fresh. Sometimes when meat is dark, it's just freezer burnt, so you can't really tell. But when the meat is fresh, you can clearly see different shades of color, shades of red in the muscle, which will tell you um, muscle tenderness. So this is our top loin steak, bone in. We can see that bone right there and that bone right there. The only thing is this bone where the T-bone was, it got chopped off. So it's just the top line. Again, just that exterior muscle that covers the top of the back. This is our, excuse me, let me go back. Top sirloin, steak, boneless, it's dry. Loin is all dry except for one cut, and I'll show you later. Top loin steak, bone in, dry. Beef, loin, top loin steak, dry. This one is boneless. It has no bone at all, no bone missing, not missing, but it looks similar. So beef loin, top loin steak, boneless, and it's dry. Next one is our cap steak. This is actually the cap that was supposed to be on the uh they yeah. This is the cap that goes on the top, the tip steak, tip roast that we saw earlier. So it's a big, it reaches the loin all the way back there to the round. But I think of it as either looking like a triangle or this, usually you'll see this little slice. So easy way is just that dermal layer, that layer of fat right there, will give it away. And then it's just a very thin muscle, like it just covers it. That's why it's called a cap, because it just covers the other muscles. This is the one that's dry moist. Dry moist because we saw earlier that exterior muscles are usually a little bit tougher because they're on the outside and they are used to cover, used to pull on the other ones, so they have to be tougher. They're used more. So this one is dry moist. So beef loin, top sirloin, cap steak, dry moist. This one is our top sirloin steak boneless cap off. Like this one had the cap on because it has that layer of fat on the outside. This one does not have that fat layer. It does have a little bit, but that's just like minor. But there is no bone. You can see this. You can think of it like our top loin because it has the outside layer. It also this one also doesn't have the inside bone. Inside, excuse me, not bone. Inside muscle. That muscle is what is here. This muscle is missing, and so is the fat layer on the top. So two ways to remember that one. You can also remember it because this one, cap off, and the sirloin usually have this layer of skin, not skin, fat layer right there that goes down the middle. So beef, loin, top sirloin, steak, boneless, cap off, and it's dry. Okay, this one is your porterhouse steak. Not too many people know about it, but it's the same, not the same thing as a T-bone, but it's very similar. The only difference is honestly the best difference in my eyes. It's the tenderloin part, this tender section right here. It's more than 2 inches, so it's way bigger than the T-bone. Right here. That inside bone, that inside muscle that I said was very tender, it's bigger in the porterhouse. So it's the same T-bone, except the inside muscle, it's bigger. If you really need to, it's I was taught that it was 2 finger, it was more than 2 fingers, more than the width of your 2 fingers. So about more than 2 inches. 2.5 inches is perfect size for a porterhouse. So yes, vertebrae here. There's T-bone right there. You can't really see it, but it's there. But tender muscle, tender loin is bigger. So beef, loin, porterhouse, steak, dry. Okay, T-bone. Easy. That T-shaped right there. That this tenderloin, it's either very minimal or it's less than 2 inches. Beef loin, T-bone, steak, dry. This one is your tenderloin. You can see two groups again. That tenderloin, but you can see the muscle groups, but they're not too bad and they're loose. So usually when a muscle is loose, it'll indicate that it's tender. And then there's sometimes this second layer. It's not usually there, but it is there at times. So, and that's the roast because you can see it's big, it's long. You can get many cuts out of it. The beef, loin, tenderloin, roast, dry. This is our tenderloin steak, our filet mignon. Some people that know it like that. Second layer that we saw earlier, and then that main tenderloin layer. Beef, loin, tenderloin, steak, dry. Okay, now we move on to various. Various again, if you guys don't remember, various means that it comes from different parts of the animal. So it can be either part of that meat is from the shoulder or from the round. It doesn't, it's not exclusive to that primal. So this is cube steak. It's dry moist. Dry moist because it is usually has more bone and cartilage. Not bone, excuse me. Usually has more cartilage and more tougher muscle. And it's not ground like grinded down like ground beef. It's just cubed, just patted down. It's like if you were to use a mallet and like break down that meat, that's usually what this is. So beef, various cube steak, dry moist. This one's ground beef. This one is very grounded up. It's broken down all the way. And because it's broken down all the way, even if it comes from a moist cut, um, that mechanical tenderizing of it makes it more tender. So it's beef, various, dry, more dry, beef, various, ground beef, dry. And this one is cube for stew. You can see all those cubes. But as the name suggests, it's for stew. So because it's for stew, it's various. It's moist. So beef, various, cube for stew, moist. Okay, now we move on to variety. I told you last time that all of organs are going to be dry except for two, and we're going to look at them right now. This is oxtail. It looks like a tail, honestly. It's very good when it's cooked well enough. This one's moist because those muscle groups, you can see how big they are, and they are very, very tough unless you cook it down very slowly. So beef, variety, oxtail, and moist. The other one that is moist is tripe. This is the stomach. Um, off the top of my head, I don't remember which one of the four stomachs it is, but it's usually one of the four. It's not it's not rare to have the tripe to be a different one of the other muscles, another other one of the other stomachs, but it's usually just one particular one. But when you look at it, it'll just look like tripe. I mean, it's white, looks nasty, it looks like a stomach, but it tastes really good. Beef, variety, tripe, moist. So all the other organs, they're dry moist. This is the liver, beef variety, liver, dry moist. Kidney, the kidney looks weird. Yeah. And so this one's beef variety, kidney, dry moist. Don't get it confused with cube or stew. This is the kidney. This is the tongue, obviously. Beef variety, tongue, dry moist. And I have two tongues for some reason. Oh, I'm missing a heart. Where's the heart? Okay, I did not put the heart there, but this is the beef heart. This one is the size of your head. So yeah, the beef variety heart dry moist. And that's all I got for today for beef. And we'll do pork next week. Or I'll try to get pork in the next video, and then I'll do just variety. And then I will do anything else you guys need me to do. But again, study from this PowerPoint. You can look up resources online, Quizlets, things like that. Doesn't matter. Just practice, practice, practice. And if you guys ever need any help, tell your teacher. They will get in touch with me. I'll help the best way I can. Thank you and have a nice day.